Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever in the world you are. Welcome to the second episode of Palmetto Property Talk with your co-hosts, Will Todd and Walker Ballou. So, Walker, what are we talking about today?
Today's topics will be down payment assistance programs and some real estate mythbusters, as we think, lots of people are having some very big misconceptions.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. So, let's get it started. All right, so what we've got now is, like I said, we're doing down payment assistance and common myths. I think we're starting with myths first. So as we go through, we're going to hit on these, and we hope these are helpful because we know a lot of people don't have a full understanding or grasp on what's going on when they're trying to buy their first home or when they're buying a home in general. So, boom, boom, boom. All right, so this is a fun one. Renovating your kitchen or bathrooms will always give you a 100% return on investment. So, share on that a little bit, Walker.
These are fun, So typically with the kitchen renovation, or bathroom renovation, people sink a lot of money into them, and then they're disappointed once they get there. They don't get the full price of the renovation back, And Charleston's actually one of the better cities for this in comparison to a lot of other real estate markets, but you're only getting 50 to 60% of that money back out of it if you do it right before sale.
Jeez.
So, yeah. I mean, certain things provide a better return on investment, but expensive things like a bathroom remodel or a kitchen remodel are not going to provide the best return on investment.
So I guess if we're talking about sellers in this situation, what would you say are some key things that they should work on if they're trying to sell their house to get their house a little more, prepared to sell and maybe get a better return on an investment for their work?
Yeah. So the best return on investment typically is, fresh coats of paint, things like putting in new floors. Those are typically a little bit cheaper and have good return on investment.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Our lovely assistant, Vincent,
Diet Cokes.
bringing us Diet Cokes.
This dude.
So you said fresh coat of paint. What else?
Floors. You'll also see good return on investment for mainly cosmetic issues like landscaping.
Okay.
That curb appeal drives up the value.
What about like light fixtures? I've heard from realtors as well that light fixtures are something that's usually pretty easy to change out, like in the kitchen or in the bathroom. I know from working in construction, it's not really as hard as, okay, I'm going to rip up the entire kitchen and remodel.
Exactly.
So what does that look like as well?
So light fixtures are another good one. It's a minor thing. They're not super expensive, and they make the house look a lot better, which is really what you're looking for if you're looking for return on investment for a seller. You make the house look better, and it's not very expensive. So that's where you're not having a bunch of sunk costs that you're trying to recover.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we have some pretty good. I mean, this first slide is not probably the most we have for the rest of these slides, but wanted to share this with you guys. Obviously the expectation is I'm going to make a boatload of money if I do this, and then you end up either going into debt. I've seen it happen before, renovating a bathroom, renovating a kitchen, and the return on investment is basically null. If not, you're in the negatives. So myth number 2, you need a perfect credit score to buy a house. So this one is so funny. I think so few people realize that you can get get a house with a lower credit score at 580, sometimes even lower depending on the situation. So for instance, this says 760 on the slide, and I think the big thing is that 760 is, near perfect. 850 is perfect, so it's 90 points from perfect, but that's a really good credit score. But you can get a conventional loan or a FHA loan at 580. So with that being said, it's very doable. But I think the big thing is with a higher credit score comes the lower rate, and the benefits of that are insurmountable. If I have a 620 credit score and I want to qualify for a down payment assistance program, then hey, that's going to be a better option. I'm going to have a better rate than someone with a 580, but I don't need a 760 to get approved. I have plenty of clients who I've worked with who have a 620 or a 600, and we've gotten them approved for an FHA loan or a VA loan. So I think the big thing is people need to understand you don't need to be in the perfect resting zone to be able to buy a house. That's why I think it was funny with the Batman meme that we put on here. You know, I have bat credit, not bad credit. 580, yeah, it's a low score, but it's not terrible. If you've got a 400, okay, you're going to have some credit repair for a while before we can get you ready to go.
What would you advise for people on that credit repair, though? Like, what steps can they take to get to a point where they can go, hey, I can have a good enough credit score now to buy that house, to qualify for that loan, qualify for that down payment assistance program?
Yeah. So the big thing is when I pull someone's credit, I actually am able to model their credit. So for instance, let's say you're trying to get a 580 credit score or a 600 credit score to qualify for a down payment assistance program. Then what you need is you need to let me look through what your current debts are. And if you have things in collections, those things, paying those off or paying them down helps. But one thing that I know helps a lot of folks if they have high credit utilization, and what that means is, let's say I have a credit card with a limit of $5,000 and I'm really close. I have $4,500 of a balance on there. If I can bring it down, that's great. But what I've suggested and what I know to be true is if you open a new small line of credit, that can boost your credit up by at least 25 points. So that's a big one that's takes a month to adjust. But other things is paying down those credit cards to get them to a lower level. That can bring your credit up as well. So there's a million ways to skin it, and the biggest thing is it's case by case. But it's not a one size fits all. But the credit card, getting a new credit card sometimes can boost it by 25 points.
Yeah, I think those are some pretty useful tips for people who are in that credit repair stage before they buy a home.
Yeah, no, it's tough when you have somebody who's got 560 and you're like, okay, you're this close to getting approved, but
right.
That's what I like doing. It's a lot of work sometimes, but if the person's willing to put in the time and put in the money to get there, it's definitely worth their while.
100%, man.
So I know we have 10 myths total. So we're at 2. So myth 3, this is always a fun one.
Yeah, spring, being that best time to buy a home.
Yeah, so it's funny because when you look at the market in a traditional, in a good market, an average market, you're going to have so many more buyers out there during spring and summer, and you might have more of an inventory. But Walker, what are your thoughts when it comes to the seasonality of real estate? Should people be buying in the spring, or what's your thought?
So spring is a great time to buy. Mm-hmm. Mainly because people list their houses during the spring. Typically they go through that spring cleaning, they list it, and then there's a lot more inventory. You have a lot more options, but with more options come more competition, and that can, mess with prices just a little bit. Even if the inventory's rising, the demand can rise and you see a little rise in prices. But sometimes you don't get that demand and the prices will actually drop during the spring or the summer. So, it's push and pull, do's and don'ts when it comes to whether or not you should buy in the spring. But it's really dependent on the situation. If you're willing to move in the fall or the winter, around the holidays, you might get a better deal. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be less options available for you. So it's really on a case-by-case basis, and it's very much what fits you and what fits your timeline and your budget.
Yeah. So then I would say, Walker, would you say usually in your experience, is it a good time to buy in the fall and winter? What's the benefit of buying during those seasons?
Less competition, really. And if you buy later in the winter, let's say January, February, you're going to see, granted, the least amount of options in terms of supply, but you're going to see probably the best deals on the market because they've been sitting there all spring and summer.
And if somebody, from what I've seen too, is if somebody's listing during that time, they're going to be a lot more negotiable when it comes to either negotiating the price down, asking for seller concessions to help cover the closing costs.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. That's where I was thinking as well. So
I said the
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Put a counter up there.
Yeah. Last time. So on to the next one. Is, and on to the point we already talked about, is you should always offer the asking price. And this is a big misconception, and I think people miss the mark when they do this.
Exactly. Yeah. But people, they think, all right, this is what it's listed for. They're used to seeing, price tag on the shelf at the store. That's what I'm going to pay for it. Real estate's a little more negotiable. It's like buying a used car. You can sort of wiggle your way around on price. You can ask for concessions. You can ask for different price reductions, different things that are your negotiating pieces in order to get the best deal for you. And a lot of those depend case on case. Mm-hmm. And, there are people that offer asking price or above asking if it's really the house they want and they don't want anyone else to have it. You saw a lot of that during COVID where everything was selling for 10 to 20 grand above asking. But we're not living in those days anymore.
Yeah.
So you have a lot more flexibility with asking for, the seller concessions and those price reductions.
Yeah, and especially right now, we're in a buyer's market. So the sellers that are out there, there's a boatload of listings. Not a boatload, but there's more than there have been in a while, and there's a lot less buyers out there. So it gives the realtor and the buyer a lot more leeway to say, okay, hey, I want to come in $10,000 lower on this house, and I also want to ask for a $5,000 seller concession. So those things you can absolutely negotiate, and it will help you be able to buy a house and actually get some more money to do a rate buy down, to cover closing costs, cover commission if necessary. These things are something you can do and help put yourself in a better situation, and you need to have the ability to negotiate instead of getting screwed like you would at a car dealership. If you pay asking price, think of it the same way. If you don't negotiate, you're not getting the best price. So you need to negotiate that asking price. All right, so you need to buy your dream home right away.
No downsizing, no upsizing, just go straight for the money.
Yeah. That is so foolish.
Very much so.
So, for instance, Walker and I are working on a deal right now. Guy is what? How old is he?
21.
He's 21. And he's not buying anything crazy. And it's also not his dream home, but it's a good starter home. So you don't need to buy, or you have to set your expectations to be realistic. When I send out a pre-approval to somebody and I say, hey, you're pre-approved for $250,000, and they're like, well, I don't understand why. The big thing is your income plays a huge factor into that. Your down payment plays a factor into it. But also, you just have to be realistic with your expectations, because you're not going to buy the mansion with the pool and the 6 bedrooms and the 2-car garage off the rip if you're a younger person. Maybe if you're making, a household income of $150,000,
right?
It's possible.
Yeah. And a lot of those expectations that come with price, you think, oh, I have to have this, I have to have that, I have to have this, whether it's a gourmet kitchen or 4 bedrooms and 2.5 baths and all this laundry list of wants that you perceive as your needs.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those are not your needs yet. Those are your dreams and aspirations. Oh, I want 3 kids. Oh, I want a dog. Oh, yep. I want this. And, you're not buying a home for the life that you want necessarily right away. You're buying it for what you need right now. Because there's always the option to sell, move into what fits your lifestyle, right? So, getting that list of expectations and filtering them by wants and needs. I do this with new buyers a lot. They have this laundry list of wants and they go, this is my requirements for a house. And it's like, all right, let's sit down, let's sort these out. What are your 2 biggest needs? What are the rest of your needs? What are your 2 biggest wants? What are the rest of your wants? And we'll gun for those 2 or 10 or 4 or whatever it is, whatever that number is of wants. And that thought exercise, I think, helps new buyers a lot, especially, young couples or the like.
Yeah, I think the big thing is setting your expectations to be realistic. And if Walker and I are in our 20s, but the reality is, okay, if Walker and I want to buy a house, if he wants to buy a house and let's say he makes $70,000 a year, okay, and let's say I make $70,000 a year, and we have the same amount saved up for a down payment. So, I'm not going to be able to buy something crazy. I might be able to buy a $300,000 house, but I'm not going to be able to buy a $400,000, $500,000 house in Mount Pleasant. So those realities, there's a gut check when you're talking to a newer couple or to a new homeowner or potential homeowner, and they say, I want to be in Mount Pleasant, I want this, I want that, and it's like, okay, based off of your pre-approval amount, I don't think we're going to be able to get you into Mount Pleasant. We can get you into West Ashley. We can get you into Upper Peninsula of Charleston. We could get you into North Charleston or Hanahan. But you have to really check your expectations at the door and wait for that pre-approval. And that's why it's so important to have that pre-approval before you go out, on Zillow, and you're like, I see that $500,000 house. And based off of Zillow, I could afford it. Right. Yeah. But Zillow's saying with 20% down, you could afford it.
Exactly. Okay? Yeah. So, those calculators, I think we're going to talk about them here in a little bit, but those calculators provide a lot of misconceptions for a lot of people.
Yeah, they do. All right. So you should skip the home inspection to save money. So
that's a fun one.
Yeah.
That's a very fun one.
Yeah.
So, I know that a lot of people sort of have this idea of, I need to save money during this. I need to negotiate all these things, and I'm going to skip all these inspections in order to close faster or in order to make my offer more appealing. That may have been the case back in COVID when it was, everybody was offering above asking and everyone was going towards the seller in terms of contract terms, like the inspection. But a lot of, those savings, you're going to pay for in the long run, especially when it comes to, for example, the home inspection comes back and there's an issue with the foundation or there's an issue with the plumbing. Those are 2 huge problems that need to be addressed pretty much immediately.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, it's different if somebody has a listing and let's say there was a previous home inspection.
Right.
And it came back fine. Okay, that's great. You don't have to pay for the home inspection. But if you're the first offer in and there's not been a home inspection yet, then of course you should definitely do that. I mean, with me as a mortgage loan officer, we do an appraisal and we see, okay, is there any structural issues and these other things so that we can actually do the loan. But if you skip out on the home inspection, I mean, you could be going in for termite damage. You could have, like you said, plumbing issues. Right. A lot of different things that maybe my appraiser doesn't see compared to that home inspector.
Right. And even if the property has had a previous home inspection, especially one that's very recent, it's always worth it to get a second set of eyes on it because one person might miss something that the other one is looking for.
That's a good point. All right. So on to the 7th. All real estate agents are the same. I love the cookie cutter and then, some random lady with a
tiny home.
Tiny house. Literally for dolls. Anyways, Walker, speak on this a little bit. And I can also write afterwards, but what are your thoughts? Like, what would you say sets apart some realtors from others?
So a lot of what sets apart a realtor is how well they communicate and how far they'll go for their clients. A lot of realtors they'll write you the contract, they'll take you through the steps, but they have other clients that they're trying to deal with as well. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those clients can be more needy or less needy. And so they end up giving you essentially the short end of the stick. And, other real estate agents will go above and beyond for you. And I like to think of myself as one of those, but not to toot my own horn per se. Yeah. But if you go with this perception that all real estate agents are slimy, they're all just joshing for the commission check, essentially.
Yeah.
Even though that's a good part of the job.
I mean, that's how you get paid.
Exactly. Right? So, going through that, thinking that they're all this cookie cutter cut out of the same sheet, is a misconception. But I'm sure you've worked with plenty of real estate agents, and I can tell you, listing agents, especially as a person who works primarily with buyers, listing agents are way different depending on which listing. Some of them are very vocal. They'll talk to you a lot. They'll ask you, hey, what's happening here? What does this look like? What is everything happening on your end? They'll be very communicative. And then other ones will just one-word texts. They end up just half ignoring you because the property isn't worth their time. It's not worth enough to them.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is that what I know with Walker is he gives a crap the whole time throughout a whole process from start to finish. And that's very important. If you don't communicate as a realtor with your clients and with the loan officer, then, I mean, I've had some realtors who don't communicate very well, and it's frustrating because I'm like, okay, I want to keep you up to date on where everything's at. Right. From the pre-approval to closing, I want to make sure we're in good communication. But for a buyer or for someone who's selling their home, it's important to say, hey, I want a realtor who has a proven track record of good communication skills, good closed deals, and, being able to just give a crap about me. I mean, when I was in the Marine Corps, I'd use a different word, a give a crap factor. Right. If you give a crap, then yes, people are going to see that. And that shows from the beginning when you start working with the client throughout the whole process. And if you don't do that, then who's going to want to work with you in the future?
Right. Like, for example, the realtor is your liaison throughout the whole transaction. They are the person that you are entrusting with one of the biggest purchases of your life. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense to pick somebody who's going to give you the time of day to, I'm going to sit down and explain everything ad nauseum about this transaction so that you feel informed and you understand what's happening. And I'm not just hand waving the fact that you don't know what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't do that, then I'm just saying, if you're a realtor and you're great at bringing the clients in, but you don't really keep them in the loop, your client's not going to be so happy with you. Might not recommend you. But yeah, I think that's a good explanation on that one, man. All right. You can't buy a house if you have student loan debt. That's fun. Very good fun. Thing it's not real. So this one is, I would say, more so for me when it comes to answering. So I like our graphic. It has a guy with literally chained to his student loan debt and then, breaking free. So with student loan debt, the biggest thing is if it's in deferral, that does not mean it's forgiven, and it does not mean you're never going to have to pay on it. So yes, you're still, beholden to the government or whoever the student loan is held by. But the reality is that it's only counted at half of 1%, so 0.5%. So if I have a student loan of $10,000, then I'm going to do the math. I should know the calculation, but I'm not that smart.
Not a human calculator.
I am not a human calculator whatsoever. So $10,000 times 0.005, that's $50 a month. Okay. If I have $10,000 in student loans, I literally am getting calculated as if I am paying a $50 payment, because a mortgage is a 30-year commitment to pay. Okay. Your student loans that are in deferral, there's no guarantee they're going to be in deferral for 30 years.
Right.
So, of course, there's going to be some sort of recourse. If they're forgiven, of course, yes, they're not going to be counted.
Right.
But what I've had other clients do is, okay, my student loans, I had a guy, he had $120,000 in student loans. Okay.
Medical student.
No, he was not.
What was he?
A teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I agree. Oh, really was my reaction. So anyways, but he had a master's degree and he was trying to become
Right.
an administrator. So, I mean, it matched what he was trying to do. But that changed everything. We're talking from $50, we're talking to about $700 of a monthly, of half of 1% would be, $700 rather than $50. So that impacted what he could afford, and he was very disappointed with that. And I said, one thing you can do if you're really focused on getting that down, because there's no way to forgive it because it's in deferral, is going to a income-based repayment plan. That brings down your total calculated DTI for that student loan, and that'll help you be able to afford more. Has he done that? I've told him twice. He has not, but at the same time, that's something that I've been able to make sure people are informed on when they're trying to negotiate a mortgage with student loans.
Right. Yeah. Very, very useful information, I think.
Yeah, I'm just talking my head off. So, all right. So,
Online
this is a good
home
one.
value estimators. Always accurate. Those Zillow calculators,
Yeah, they're
man.
always right, man. They're always right. Not. So, what are your thoughts? You want to give a little explanation?
Yeah. So those online home calculators, Redfin and Zillow and all of the above.
Yeah.
They're taking into account, sold listings and all this other stuff. These comparable properties, or we would call them as comps.
Yep.
An appraiser will do the same thing. We'll do the same thing when we're looking to list a home, and we'll say, all right, let's look at all of what's sold recently. But a lot of what doesn't happen is that discernment of, okay, this home has all of these features and it's been recently renovated. It has all of this work that's been put into it that your home that you're trying to sell or buy right now doesn't. And so it'll just look geographically and say, this is what it's sold geographically for in terms of square footage, beds, baths. But it won't take into account that discernment of the fireplace in this home adds an extra $10,000 in value. Rough estimate.
Yeah.
Very, very rough estimate. But you'll find a lot of that where it will just take properties that we don't think of as comps because of how different they are, even though they're similar square footage wise, and it'll try to apply the same square footage price to that property. And it gives people, I think, an inflated head view or a deflated head view, depending on if their home has those features. Yeah.
So with that being said, I think one thing that I've been able to help realtors, especially with their listings, but even with realtors who have buyers, is, okay, I have access with one of the lenders that I use to give a comp sheet, a comparable sheet that's 6 pages long. It does break it down, like we're talking about, based off of the square footage, the bedrooms, the bathrooms. But you can also adjust it if the square footage, let's say they had an addition, I can update that in the report. And then let's say the condition of the home is, the average house in the area is, not a very nice house, but this house has been recently completely renovated and redone, then that can add value as well. And it gives a 12-month comparables, and it also tells you how similar are those houses.
Right.
And it's really helpful for realtors with listings, but it's also helpful for negotiating for your buyers.
Right. And, a lot of realtors, we do those same comp pulls for listing a new home or buying a new home, depending on, whether we want to negotiate like that or not. So, but we look at the last 3 to 6 months typically instead of a full 12 months because we're looking at a much more snapshotted version of the market. We're looking less long-term. We're looking more, the market changes very fast. Same thing I know with mortgage rates. They change daily.
Yep.
Our market changes pretty much month to month, week to week. And so if we pull all those comp reports and we see what's sold in the last 3 to 6 months, what we'll do is we'll discern, we'll go, okay, we'll take the 20 listings that it gives. We'll filter out the riffraff, things that aren't really comparable to the home, whether it's because of date of construction, renovations, various things, and we'll filter those out. So we do the same comp reports, but I think we put a lot more detail into them. And if you can get your realtor to pull a comp report, even if you're buying or selling, get them to pull it, get them to show you, 6, 10, 12 page comp report.
Yep.
And it's all filtered, it's all adjusted. you'll end up getting a very close number in comparison to things that just aggregate big numbers and go average and spit out a home value.
Yeah, especially I had another realtor friend of mine. He's like, yeah, I had this house on the market for over 120 days, and the seller, he's the listing agent, and he's like, the seller wanted to put it $100,000 above the average list price, and that's the reason why it sat. And I was like, why? He's like, the seller said, oh, well, I know the value of my house. I've sold 3 homes during my lifetime. And he's like, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've sold over 1,000 homes.
Right.
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So don't pigeonhole yourself. Okay, Zillow says X, Y, and Z. Redfin says this, and realtor.com says this. Okay, cool. That's awesome. I'm glad you have an idea of what your house is worth.
Right. Or
how much you can afford, but reality is going to set in when we actually go through and do our jobs. Right. You're not the real estate expert. That's the realtor's job, and then the pre-approval is going to be the financing aspect.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm sure those online financing calculators are just as much a headache for you.
They are, because people are like, oh, I can afford this much because I make this much. Okay, well, do you have the down payment?
Right.
Do you have the credit score? Do you have the credit score as well? So yeah, no, 100%. It's
free real estate.
Exactly.
It is free real estate.
So that one is a good one. So you need a 20% down payment to buy a house. I think we just hit on that. So
yeah, I'll let you sort of take the lead on this one a little bit. This is more your wheelhouse.
Yeah. So 20% down payment is a good idea if you want to avoid your private mortgage insurance. Okay. You do not need it in order to purchase a home. You can buy a house. A conventional loan requires 3% down payment if you're a first-time home buyer. For FHA, 3.5%, and then with a VA loan, you can do it with 0% down. So the other thing is that there's so many options out there now for down payment assistance programs. So you can actually purchase a home with 0% down. The offside, or the counter or con to that, is you do have a higher rate when you use these down payment assistance programs, but it does get you into a house with no cash down. So that's something that's really helpful for buyers, especially first-time home buyers. But a lot of these down payment assistance programs that we're going to talk about here in a second, you can be a first-time home buyer, or you can be, a home buyer and you're trying to downsize, or you're trying to buy a bigger home. Those things are options. So definitely, like I said, it's not free real estate. That's false advertising, but it is funny. It's a way that you can actually buy a house and not be stuck renting, paying someone else's mortgage for the rest of your life. All right, so
get into the meat and potatoes.
The fun meat and potatoes down payment assistance programs. So I have a lot of different lenders here at Lifetree Lending that we work with that offer down payment assistance programs. Was just trying to work with a client on this. Her credit score was about 4 points too low to get her into that. But the thing is we're working on her credit and trying to get her in the ready position. And these are some programs that I think will be helpful for you guys as first-time home buyers, or if you're just looking to move to the Charleston area with very little cash down. So we're highlighting just 4 today. The first one we're going to hit on is the Boost Down Payment Assistance Program. That can get you up to 5% of your total purchase price of a down payment assistance. And it's for FHA or conventional. So it's really great. They can be a forgivable or a repayable loan. So a forgivable loan, I'm just going to break that down really quick for you guys. A forgivable loan is a loan or a lien that's put on the home, and it's forgiven after a certain period of time. So let's say I have that 5% or I have 3.5%. That's a forgivable loan. Let's say I have to live in the house for 10 years and it's forgiven. Or if I want to sell my house before the 10 years is up, it gets paid off when I leave the house.
I think it's worth it explaining for people who don't know, especially as, first-time home buyers. What is that lien?
Yeah.
I know that contractors will use that a lot, and, lien is a funny word.
Yeah. So a lien is similar. So when you buy a car, I'll just explain it this way. When you buy a car with a car loan, okay, you have a lien or a loan put against it. It's a pledge that's put against the car with the financing company. When they put a lien on it, they own the car. They have the deed or the title to that vehicle until it's completely paid off. Once it's paid off, then you have the title, right? So it's very similar when it comes to a house. When you buy a house with a mortgage, there's a lien put in the first position. That's your mortgage. And that's in place until you pay off the house. If you do a down payment assistance program like one of these, it gets put in the second lien position or second loan position if you want to make it easy. And that's what that means. If a contractor puts a lien on your property, let's say you're doing a renovation,
right?
Then they're saying, okay, I am going to claim X amount of your house, and you'll have to sell it. If I put a lien on your house, I'm claiming $20,000 of a lien against your home until you pay me. Right.
And that typically doesn't happen unless you don't pay the bill originally.
Exactly.
So those liens, you still own the house technically, but they own that stake that the lien states.
Exactly. Yes. So it's a portion. So like I said, you would have, if I put 3% down on my house, then I own 3% of the equity of my home. And then 97% of the home is owned by the financing institution. So it could be, let's say, Chase Bank. Then Chase Bank owns 97%. They hold the deed to my home until I pay it completely off.
Right.
All right. So that's Boost. It's a great program. Elevate is a grant. It's not like the first one. It's not going to put a lien on your house. It's a grant that you receive, and it's up to 3.5%, but as low as 2% for FHA. For conventional, it can go to 1, 2, or 3. It could cover your entire down payment. It could cover part of it, or you could use it to help with closing costs. Then the Aurora DPA is, again, it's up to 5% of the total purchase price, very similar to Boost. And then the FHA 100% CLTV, and what that means is combined loan to value. Combo program is a 3.5% assistance that is a lien similar to Boost and similar to Aurora. It's a 3.5%, basically covering just the closing costs, or not the closing costs, just the down payment for an FHA loan. So that's really helpful for a lot of folks. All right, on to the meat and potatoes. All right, Boost DPA, like I said, 5% total. It can be 3.5% or 5%. What you need to have, I've had issues with people who have had a 580 credit score. When you have a 580 credit score, if you have to do a manually underwritten loan, and we can talk about that on another episode, but if you do that, you can't qualify for as much. You can't qualify for that 5%. You can only qualify for 3.5%. So 600 is what I'm putting on here because it gives you the best bang for your buck. There's no income limit, which is good. So some of these programs require you to make below a certain amount. And this qualifies for 1 to 4 unit homes. And that also includes manufactured homes such as mobile homes.
Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of those being on the market and very reasonable, good options for people.
Yeah, and I think so many people think, oh, if I get a mobile home, people are going to think I'm trailer trash. Okay, you don't have, it's not going to be like you're buying into a trailer park. Trailer parks are literally rented out. So you could buy a piece of land and the mobile home and actually have, let's say you buy 5 acres out in Ladson and you have a nice mobile home on there and it's $180,000. I mean, hey, that's
very affordable option.
Exactly.
Who would you say this program is for, though?
Well, I mean, I would say it's more so for your first-time home buyers. You don't have to be a first-time home buyer to use this program. But I would say it gives people within the low to moderate income a really good option to be able to purchase something with little to no down payment.
Right.
All right, elevate. All right.
Good old mountain climber over
Yeah,
there.
man. Look at him. Look at that guy go. Look at him go. He's climbing up. Yo. All right.
He got his house. Looky
There we
there.
go. So this, like I said, it's a grant. It's not a lien like the other three that are on this list. You do have to have a 620 credit score, which is very doable. And there is an income limit of 160% of the area median income. So for Charleston, I believe it's $80,040. So 160%, you just multiply that by 1.6, and that's where you get that $134,000 number. So I mean, that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
So especially if the median income is $80,000. So then that's going to qualify for 1 to 4 unit primary residences. This does not allow manufactured homes, but it is a great program, especially if you're using a conventional or an FHA loan, which is going to be the majority of first-time home buyers and low to moderate income home buyers. So Aurora, I know we've got great graphics.
Today's graphics
thanks
are
to
going
that guy.
up.
Thanks to that guy. So up to 5% down payment assistance, forgivable, repayable, very similar to Boost. Once again, we want you to have a 600 credit score if you're going to do this. It's the same income limit as Elevate, and this is 1 to 2 unit primary residences. It includes double wide manufactured homes, so that's going to be your double wide mobile homes. So also another great option. Then the last one I've got on here is the FHA 100% combined loan to value program. This one, once again, it's a lien. It does not cover closing costs, but it does cover your down payment if you're doing an FHA or Federal Housing Administration loan. You need to have a 600 credit score. There's no income limits. It has to be an FHA loan, and it's only for primary residences. To my knowledge, it does not require you to have 1 to 4 units. I think there's pretty much a lot of leeway with this one. I can double check, but to my knowledge, this doesn't have very many limits when it comes to what type of home it needs to be.
So would you say this is more for the real estate savvy person?
So really this one, the FHA, this program here, I would say is not just for the real estate savvy person. This one is really a great program if you have down payment assist, or you have the closing cost, but you don't have the down payment.
Right.
So that's one thing. But I would say of the 4 that I've listed, this is the lowest tier. If I'm being very frank, because it only covers 3.5%. It only covers your down payment. Then you've got to come up with closing costs, which can be, let's say $5,000 to $10,000. Depending on the loan size, it could be more than that. It's usually 1 to 3%, sometimes up to 5%. But so this is, like I said, it's probably the least of the 4.
The 4.
The other 3, I would say, are home runs.
Right.
Especially with the Boost and the Aurora offering up to 5%. That's insane.
Yes, that is very much doable for a lot of people.
Yeah.
They're in that position where they have a couple grand saved, but they don't think they have enough for a house.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, if I was a first-time home buyer, so let's say I'm Walker and I'm buying my first house, and I am trying to figure out, okay, I have $2,000 saved and I make $60,000 a year, and I'm going to have to go FHA because it allows me to also get a lot more in seller concessions.
Right.
So let's say I do one of these down payment assistance programs, and I'm like, okay, well, I also want to buy my rate down. then I can get a seller concession. And I actually have a lot more ability to utilize the 5% that way because I get a lower rate, and I also get lower PMI. Yes, there's PMI for the length of an FHA loan, but you're getting a better option overall, man.
And like the deal I think we were talking about earlier, we actually negotiated too much seller concession because it was conventional originally. But yeah, the Navi phone ringer.
Thank you.
But, you know, I'm sure you can speak to this more. What are the limits for those seller concessions for different types of loans?
So this is something, you know, realtors need to be aware of as well as buyers. So if I'm going to buy a house and I want to get seller concessions, for a conventional loan, I can go no more than 3% of the purchase price for seller concessions. For the entire transaction, if my house is $300,000, I can go nowhere above $9,000 in either seller concessions or lender credits. With an FHA loan, I can go up to 6%, which is enormous. I mean, you're doubling how much you can do. And that opens a lot more opportunity for the seller concessions. It opens a lot more opportunity for down payment assistance and these other things. So that's what I would say is, if you're going to buy a house, there's a couple ways to skin the cat, but the FHA is going to give you more ability to negotiate when the realtor's trying to negotiate a seller credit for you, or if you want to get the down payment assistance to fit into that criteria.
Yeah. And I think that is very useful information, especially for people who are looking to save a little bit of money and not completely drain their savings when buying a house.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super important. All right. What else do we have? I think that was it, man.
That was the end of it.
Whoa. We're just zooming along today.
Exactly. You know?
Exactly. All right. Well, we're going to make sure we put the exactly counter at the top, probably in the middle up here.
Yeah.
So I know Walker loves to say exactly, but guys, I appreciate all of you tuning in today. I think we have kind of zoomed through, and if you guys have questions, please definitely don't do that.
Just listen.
Please just comment below, like and subscribe if you are liking the content so far. There's more to come. I think we're going to be talking more so on Walker's side of what he's seeing for trends in the market, and what our predictions for
the coming year is.
Yeah, the coming year, spring into fall.
Yeah. And if you want to reach out to us, you know, we'll take questions at info@palmettopropertytalk.com. You can email us there. We also have our website down here in the banner. Scan the QR code, punch it into your browser, however works for you.
Yep.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and have a good one.
All right.